Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing Who Was Better. The topic of this Who Was Better: two good friends, two former ECW Tag Team Champions, two wrestlers whose in-ring style couldn't be any different. We're talking about Cold Scorpio and the Sandman. If you haven't seen any of my Who Was Better videos previously, we grade everybody on 8 different categories. Each category has a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. At the end, we do total up the points, and whoever has the most overall points is the winner. There is a chance for 5 bonus points, and that'll be talked about when we get there. With that being said, let's jump right in with our first category, technical wrestling. For Cold Scorpio, I'm giving him a 5. I think Cold, much like an Eddie Guerrero, is very well-rounded, and while you might think of his flying maneuvers like the 450 or the tumbleweed, he was a good technical wrestler as well, a really good technical wrestler. I would say at the time that he wrestled, he's one of the better in-ring performers of his generation, hence why he gets a 5 here. Now for the Sandman's getting a 2. Let's be honest, folks. Sandman, if there's a big hole in his game, it was the in-ring performance. And I wouldn't say he's the worst in-ring wrestler there's ever been, but I think if you strip away all the stuff that makes him special and you just went with this, he'd probably not be remembered at all. And I do think if you go from the beginning of his career when he was more of the surfer to all the way through the end of his career, which he still wrestles now. Both these guys actually still wrestle. Now, actually, I don't know if Scorpio does after his stabbing incident, but as of recently, they both wrestled still. As the years went on, Sandman, his in-ring technical ability kind of devolved, and it kind of fit his character of what evolved of it. With that being said, I can't grade him much higher than this. I think he is below average here. That's why he gets a 2. Now, our next category, striking. For this, Scorpio gets a 4. Like I said, he's very well-rounded. The one thing I will say about Scorpio that is kind of a precursor of what we see now, but really stood out then, is at times his striking, his kicks looked a little bit choreographed. And yes, I know that's a thing that's discussed nowadays with a lot of the new style of wrestlers, and it's something that I don't like. Even if you go back to early Rob Van Dam, he had that same issue. Now, Rob did work that out eventually, and Scorpio did to a degree as well, but I do feel like that's the difference between him getting a 4 and a 5, is there are times where I felt like he choreographed his strikes a little too much. Now for Sandman's getting a 5. I go back to something I heard about Terry Funk in a shoot interview, and it might have been Mick Foley that said it, or it might have been one of Mick's books. Mick had always admired Terry Funk's punches, or whoever made the quote, but I'm going to attribute it to Mick, because he thought they looked the most real. And then when he finally got in the ring to fight Terry Funk, he found out why they looked the most real, because he was actually hitting them. I think the same thing applies here for Sandman. Sandman gets a 5 because his punches, his kicks, his cane strikes looked real because most likely he was actually hitting you. This is where I think he evolved into that brawling, beer fighting character. The guy that you would see at the bar that gets in a fight because he's a Philadelphia Eagles fan and a Dallas Cowboys fan is arguing with him. And trust me, as someone that grew up in the area, I know a ton of guys that are just like that. You might even catch me like that if you get me in the right argument. But he's that kind of guy. He's the kind of guy you see at every bar, every Friday and Saturday night in the greater Philadelphia area, which is why he connected with that crowd so greatly. Now going from that, our next category, how they perform as a heel. For both of these guys, I'm giving them a 3. And the reason being, they weren't bad heels. Don't get me wrong by that. I do think, however, even as a heel, whether it be Scorpio's innovative style, and believe me, Cold Scorpio was one of the most innovative wrestlers of all time. He doesn't get the credit he deserves. Him and Sabu, I think, are the most underrated wrestlers of that generation. I think there's so much that they innovated that people just haven't given them the respect for. To me, these are two guys that I would consider Hall of Famers because so many people copied what they did. And for that, I don't think Scorpio ever really was a heel, because even when he had heel tendencies, the fans still loved him. Same thing with Sandman. Even early when he was a heel, there was a point where you couldn't make Sandman a heel again because he was just too beloved. But even in his early heel run, maybe if you talk about the Surfer Sandman stuff, it's almost a different person altogether. His early heel stuff, when we're talking about the Dreamer feud and stuff of that nature in the early days of ECW, was good, but I don't think he was ever that top tier heel. Like I said with Scorpio, they just both kind of felt average. Now going from that, how they perform as a face. For Too Cold Scorpio, he's getting a 4. Again, this is where I think he excelled. I think people generally gravitated to Scorpio. They genuinely wanted to cheer him, wanted to be on his side, and he was flashy, hence the name Flash Funk. And I know, I'm sorry, Scorp. I'm gonna guess that you probably want to forget that part of your career, even though the only Too Cold Scorpio figure I have is the Flash Funk one. I don't even think he has another figure. Well, I know he has a Japanese figure from when he was in Noah, but I don't think he has an American figure other than the Flash Funk one. If he does, let me know, because I'd love to get that at some point. I digress. He's a great babyface. Everybody loved him from kids to adult. For Sandman, Sandman gets a 5. For his time, for the promotion he was in, there was no bigger babyface in ECW, Tommy Dreamer included, than the Sandman. Maybe Sabu when he was a face, maybe Terry Funk, but this was the guy that was literally the face of ECW, or one of the faces of ECW. This would kind of be like, if we look at 2000s WWE and you had Cena and Orton and Lesnar and Batista, it would be for ECW, Sandman and Shane Douglas and Dreamer and Raven, or Sabu if you want to put him in one of those spots. That's the kind of hierarchy. If you make a Mount Rushmore for ECW, you almost certainly have to put the Sandman in there. And everybody loved him, like I said. For the audience they catered to, everybody has a Sandman in their family. Everybody has that blue-collar, no-nonsense, beer-drinking ass-kicker in their family, or knows that guy. Hence why he connected so well. That's why he was such a great face. Now going up next, promos. For Too Cold Scorpio, this might be his worst category. I'm giving him a 3. Now, it's not to say that Scorpio was bad. He wasn't Jeff Farmer on the microphone, but he wasn't ever the guy that talked you into the building. He brought you to the building to see his matches because they were so innovative and his style was so different than everybody else at the time, but he wasn't the guy that could say, hey, I'm fighting Tommy Dreamer next week, and you wanted to see it just because of that. He was serviceable, but I can't put him much higher than this. For Sandman, I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to give him a 4. And a lot of that has to do with the Sandman and Raven feud. And the feud between Sandman and Raven, he really stretched who he was and how he built that character and showed us not really a different side of him, but a different take on the same character. I thought he was really good at promos. Again, not the best. There are guys in ECW I think were better. Shane Douglas was amazing. Raven, one of the best promo guys in the world. Terry Funk, one of the greatest talkers that's ever picked up a microphone. But Sandman did have the ability to talk you into a fight. If he told you he was going to cane the shit out of Tommy Dreamer this Saturday in the ECW arena, you bought tickets to see it. If he told you he was going to have a barbed wire, no rope match against Sabu in the Elks Lodge, you were going to buy tickets to see that. That's why he gets a little bit of the upper hand here, because I think he had that capability where Scorpio didn't quite. Now, next category, charisma. For Scorpio, Scorpio's getting a 4. Again, he had that connection. He had that thing. When I think of Scorpio, when I think about people that are like him, I think of Rob Van Dam. I think of the Rock and Roll Express. I think of people that just naturally connect with the fans and naturally the fans want to cheer for. He had that swagger about him, almost to a point of cockiness, but it wasn't cocky. It kind of felt like a Kobe Bryant or an Allen Iverson, where they were confident in their capabilities and then they backed it up. I think his charisma really high here. Again, that's why we all love Scorpio. Now for the Sandman, Sandman gets a 5. It's a totally different kind of charisma. It's a totally different character. But everything that I've said so far about the fans connecting with Sandman, that's where his charisma comes across. Because he can tell you that story. He can bring you into it, whether it be he stays home for a month while he's blinded, or he relays the pain of his son turning against him, or he just makes some offhand jokes about his ex-wife not being the most faithful person. I think Sandman, again, there's a reason why he was such a big draw in ECW, and there's a reason why they gave him the championship over and over and over again. He gets a 5 here. He was extremely charismatic. Now going to our last category, big game performance. This is how they perform when they're in a main event, whether it be a pay-per-view, a house show, a big blow-off match, anything of that nature. For 2 Cold Scorpio, Scorpio's getting a 5. I think the comparison between Scorpio and Eddie Guerrero is the best I could make for anybody that didn't see a lot of Scorpio's work. He had that same vibe that I get from watching Eddie Guerrero matches. Or if we take it back to like the 80s, a Tito Santana match. Or if we go further into the future and think of someone from this generation, maybe like a Kofi Kingston. He had that ability, and he had that ability to have great matches with pretty much any style of wrestler in any promotion he was in, whether he was wrestling Vader, whether he was wrestling Sandman, whether it was him and Bagwell teaming up against, let's say, the Nasty Boys. I don't even know if they teamed against them. Or whoever else he was in the ring with. He always looked great, and his opponent always looked great. I can't say enough about 2 Cold Scorpio and how underrated he is. Again, I think he's an absolute 5 as a big game performer. Now, on the flip side, our friend the Sandman, he's getting a 3. A lot of this comes down to the fact that Sandman in-ring is not the performer that Scorpio is. And in a company that was super innovative, especially a lot of the in-ring talent, if you look at the style of wrestling before ECW starts versus when ECW shuts down in 2001, so you take something, look at, let's say, WWE. A WWE match from 93, just any match, and then one from 2001, and look at the evolution. And a lot of that comes from ECW. A lot of the attitude or ruthless aggression, a lot of the high-flying style, a lot of the emphasis on great technical matches, whether it be someone like the redacted Chris Benoit, or Eddie Guerrero, or Taz, or Lance Storm, or even Shane Douglas. They would have great technical matches. When you look at Sandman, his main events, if he was involved, were always a brawl. And not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm not discounting that at all. I love the Sandman. Sandman was my stepfather's favorite wrestler, and I was very fond of him too. He's a guy that has a special place in my heart, but I can't look at him and say Sandman had the great matches. He really didn't. He had great stories. He might have been part of a great match that might have been a 3-way or a 6-way or a tag team match, but it wasn't ever because of Sandman. And I'm not knocking the guy. I absolutely love him. This is one of the weak spots in his repertoire, and I believe even Sandman would say that to you, that, you know, once he get in the ring, he might not be as good as anyone else. Not anyone else, because there's a lot of people that are worse than Sandman. I've seen a lot of people that have been in main events of really big shows that couldn't hold a candle to the Sandman in the ring. But I digress. Sandman gets a 3 here, right about average in my opinion. So let's total them up. For 2 Cold Scorpio, Scorpio gets a 31 total. For Sandman, Sandman gets a 32, so he's just 1 above, 1 point ahead. Now here's the tiebreaker, or here's the bonus points. Every week on Wednesday, I put a poll out on my posts page on the YouTube channel, and this is where you guys can get involved. Basically, I put the next 2 wrestlers that are going to be in my Who Was Better video, and I let you decide who you think is better. Now, you could use whatever criteria you want. You don't have to use the criteria I use here. You could even just vote if you think one's more attractive than the other. That's up to you, whatever you decided on. Whoever wins that vote gets a bonus 5 points on the video. So with this, our bonus 5 points, this was kind of a shocker, especially if you read the comments from the post. The Sandman gets the bonus 5 points. Almost every comment was pro Scorpio, and it was a close vote. It wasn't like an 80% to 20%. I've had blowouts in these votes. It was very close. But somehow Sandman won. And again, I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. If you look at the quotes and you look at the vote, it tells two different stories. Or the comments, not the quotes. But I digress. You guys picked to give Sandman the bonus 5, bringing him up to a total of 37, giving him the overall win here. And what I would say before I went into this is a little bit of a shocker. I thought Too Cold was going to run away with this. But when I really started to break it down, it was a lot more close than I thought it was going to be. And a lot of Sandman's qualities really shined here. But let me know what you think. Hit me up down here in the comments. While you're there, smash the like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Who Was Better.